Okay, so today I am going to show you how to make three-dimensional bow tie blocks. These are so much fun to make. It's a great way to use up scraps that you might have that, you think, well, what am I going to do with these? Well, these little bow ties are perfect for using up those scraps that you might have. So what we're going to do is the first thing that you're going to need is you're going to need, I'm going to slide these up so we can just have them there in the background. You're going to need three-inch squares of your main fabric. And this is going to be hard to see because they're white on top of white. You're going to need two. Oh, good, we can see those. You're going to need two of your background blocks. Now, the size that we're working with, again, they are 3-inch blocks. But if you wanted to make a 4-inch or a 5-inch or a 6-inch, it's all up to you. I would not suggest going any smaller than a 3-inch block because it gets harder and harder to work with. Because remember, this is three-dimensional. So the little knot in the center, let's see if I can give this one a better look here. Do you see how my fingers can go in here? The thing is that the smaller you get, the smaller this piece is going to get, and it's a lot more difficult to work with. So I highly recommend not going smaller than using a 3-inch square. So the first thing that we're going to do is this. Let me just slide these over here. I think that'll work. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take one of your main fabrics. I'm going to get this a little closer. And you're going to just fold this in half, wrong sides together, and just give it a little bit of a finger crease there. Then you're going to take your background fabric and you're going to take the folded main fabric and you're going to lay it right on top of your background piece. All right. Then we're going to take another of our main fabric square and we're going to put this wrong side up and we are going to line that up with the background square on the bottom. And I like to give that a couple of pins so they don't slide around on me. Okay. So there we go. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the red one. So here, here's my one main fabric 3-inch square. We're going to give it a nice little finger crease. Lay it on top of our background fabric and make sure the edges are even. I'm going to take that second main 3-inch square, lay it on top, just like so, and we're going to pin that in place. All right, now we're going to go to the machine and we're going to sew 1/4 inch down this side. All right, so as you can see, I have sewn down size of my little blocks here, 1/4 inch. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to open this seam up. But the first thing that I want to do before I press that open is, do you see where that little fold is right there? It's kind of hard to see, but there actually is a little fold where we folded that 1 3-inch square in half. And so now I'm just going to clip that little fold, and I'm going to do it on both of them. Pull this back. This maybe is hard to see. My apologies for that. There it is. Can you see that little fold right there? So we're just going to take our scissors and we're going to give that little fold a nip. Then we're going to take this and we're going to see how this is. There's our little folded 3-inch square. So we're just going to take him, I'm going to push him over towards the main fabric there. And before I do that, I forgot this, I love using the Easy Press pen. And the reason that I do is it is so nice to just take that pen, and there is liquid inside there, and you just push on the tip and then run that right along the seam that you just made. And then I take my wooden iron, and I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to open up that seam allowance. And I just take my wooden iron and I run that right along my stitching. Let's do this one. Do the same thing. The reason that I like to do that is that gets that nice and flat. It gets that seam put right where I want it. And then I'm just going to take my iron and I'm just going to sit it on it for a second. There we are. Oops. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take these pieces and we're going to take that and open that up. So where before this was how it was, remember we had our background piece, our folded main 3-inch square, and this guy was laid on top and then we stitched. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open this up and we're going to pull both of those pieces. I'm just going to give that a nice little finger crease right there. I'm going to pull both of those pieces to the left-hand side. And now my background fabric is now right side up where I can see it. And my main fabric is on the back where I cannot see it. And we're going to do that for both of these. So here we go. See, remember it was like this. And we opened this up. We're going to hold on to him. And we're going to flip this to the other side. And I'm going to give it a nice finger crease. There we have that. Okay, so next, we're going to take another piece of background, right side up, and we're going to, again, line the top edge and the side edge of our folded main fabric with our piece of background. And then we're going to take our same colored fabric 3-inch square and we're going to lay that on top of that, just like so. And we're going to pin that in place. Oops, pin through all of those. We're going to do the same thing to this one. So here is my background fabric. My folded main fabric square, lined up with the top and the side edge. In here and in here. And now we're going to go and sew 1/4 inch on this side. All right, so as you can see, I've stitched down both sides of our little squares here. And now we're going to do the exact same thing that we did before. But before we do anything, I'm going to pull that seam back so I can see what I'm doing. And I am going to knit that fold. So you're doing the exact same thing that you did in the first go round. But all of a sudden, you're going to have this weird looking little flag thing. All right, so let's get our fabric Easy press pin. Open this up. One. Okay, put it with the iron. Now we're going to take this piece and we're going to flip them over and make sure that they're nice and flat on both sides, and they are. Give that a nice finger press. If you're at your ironing board, then just go ahead and hit it with the iron. Works for me. All right. So now we have these two very interesting little flag pieces, don't we? Now this is, it's a little awkward the first couple times you do it, but the more you do this, the better you get at opening this up. All right, so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to, even though we've pressed this nice, we're going to open up both of our flaps here. Okay, so we've got our little, I'm just going to call them flaps, our little blocks, they are opened up. The thing that I do want you to notice, and you want to make sure you pay close attention to this, is that you want to make sure that your main fabric pieces are opposite one another as our background pieces are. All right, so what you're going to do is you've opened up your flaps and you're going to reach in here and you're going to use your fingers like a pair of tweezers, and you're going to put them in there about halfway, or I would say in the center of our little strip here. And we're going to pull this little rectangle to the side, one on each side, and you're going to have a little fold there. It's a little hard to see, but you've got a fold there. And now we're going to make sure that if you want to, you could actually go and you could pin this guy in place here on both sides just to hold it so you don't have to sit there and fuss with it. You're going to do the same thing over here. See how I've got him all lined up? Okay. Then you're going to take the top flap section and we are going to open up our little seam allowance and we are going to line those seam allowances up with one another. You know, as you can see, they are lined up very nicely. And we want to make sure that our little fold here is right along the edge of the block behind it. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull this around and make sure that the raw edges are even. And if you need to, give it another pin right there. And then go ahead and pin this edge as well. And then we're going to come over and we're going to do the exact same thing to this side. So as you can see, our little folded rectangle is lined up with the background square. My seam allowances are lined up very nicely. And we're just going to pin here. And here on the end. All right, so that is what that's going to look like. Let me show you one more time on this guy. So go ahead and open up your little flaps or your wings or whatever it is you want to call them. And then you're going to get your folded rectangle. You're going to put your fingers halfway in the center there, and you're going to pull that, and you're going to make sure those little edges are even. And you're going to pin this one in place. And we're going to do the same thing over here. Make sure those edges are even. All right. We're going to open this one up. Open up our seam allowance. We're going to line that seam allowance up. And they are, there they go. There, that's much better. They're right on top of one another. And we're going to pin this one. And nice even edges. Come along here and along the top, make sure the side edges are even. All right, so that one's pinned as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew 1/4 inch down this side. Make sure that your seam allowances stay flat. It's just not going to, there's a lot of bulk there because remember you have 2 layers of your folded main fabric, and then you have a layer from each of your squares. So it gets a little thick there. So make sure that that is open. If you want, once you get everything pinned in place, you could nest those seams as well. That is entirely up to you. You do what is going to make you happy. So I'm going to go and I'm going to stitch these, and then we'll be back and we'll open up our bow tie. All right, so I've got these stitched. So as you can see, they are stitched 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now I'm going to take this, and I did each one differently. So this is what has the seam allowance open. This one, as you can see, has been pushed so that they are nesting. So again, you can do this either way you want. Just remember that your center where these 4 joints come together are going to be hidden. You're not going to see if you've got perfect points underneath our little bow tie knot. So just remember that. So now I'm going to do is I'm going to open that up. Look how cute that is. Isn't that fabulous? So before I do anything else, me and my friend, the Easy Press Pen, we're going to do that seam allowance. And since I opened this other one up, I'm going to go ahead. I got to knit this first though. And we've got one on each side now. Pull that back. And just be very careful when you do that because you want to make sure that you're only nipping the folded rectangle. All right, so now we're going to open that up. That bulky seam allowance, and there's that other folded area. And then we'll just take our iron. And I do like to turn them over and make sure that my seams are nice and flat. And now you can see that there is an opening underneath our little knot. So let's look at the other one here. So remember, this one we press to the side. So let's get Easy Press Pen. Sure he looks good there. Yes. All right. All righty. Then what I like to do is I will take my, oh, did I forget to clip? Oh, forgot to clip those. All right. Now, to get that to lay flat, that little square in the center, what you do is you're going to, you see how my seam allowances are going around. Let me get this one pressed down here. I want them to form like a little square here in the center. So what you do is you see which direction your seams are going, and you want the other guys that you're fixing to press to follow around each other. So needless to say, this guy has got to go this way because he's shooting for this guy, this seam that is pointing to the right. This seam is pointing to the left. So that means that this guy has got to point up towards him. So the easiest way to do that is you just grab your seam allowances and you pull it. And let me see if I can get this closer so you can see that stitching. There we go. You can just make out the stitching there in the center. So if that is kind of hung up, then I just take my scissors and I just give just the stitching a little nip. And then what that does is that allows that little square to form in the center of my block. And we're going to take our wooden iron and we're just going to rub that on there. Then we're going to flip it over. Let me come up just a hair again. There we go. And I'm going to press my seams. And that one is being kind of ornery. So guess what? We're going to get our easy press pin again, and we're going to give that a little bit of a extra. There we go. So there are our three-dimensional bow ties. Now, the thing that is fun about this is that you are able to do, stitch one right after the other. So what I've done here is, let me set these aside. So see, these are all ready. So what I did was I just took all of them. I pinned them all. They're already pinned and pressed, so you can see the 1/4 inch seam allowance there. So the nice thing about that is you can chain piece this just as if you were doing something that is, just a couple of pieces, a couple of blocks being sewn together into your regular block pattern. So that's what I've done. So all I need to do now is I'm just going to go along and using my easy press pin, I'm just going to get those all ready to go. And then I'll open that up. And I've already clipped those. So then we're just going to open those all up. Or if I wanted, I could press to the dark side. This guy, I'm going to bring him over there too. You're just going to go along and you're going to do that just as if you were piecing a bunch of blocks together. And actually, I will tell you, it's a little bit easier to press with our little flag over. Well, let me get this out of the way. It's a little bit easier to press this guy flat if the little flag part is over on the left. So we're going to just give him a press. And then all we have to do is flip this over. And give him a press as well. All right, so now I'm going to get all of these ready, and we're going to go back and we're going to do the exact same thing that we did when we were making our individual blocks. All right, so I have got taken care of having the one side finished. So there we have it. So now if I'm going to kind of like chain piece this, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to line up my background square with my folded square rectangle here. I do want to point out that when you lay this on here, you're going to line up this side, the top, and the right-hand side. When you fold this back, you will see that that seam allowance is really inside of your background square. That doesn't matter because you're going to be sewing this seam. You're not going to sew this seam yet. So don't worry about where this seam allowance is. Your biggest concern is to make sure that the top edges and the side edges are even. And so it just goes a lot faster if you just take the time to string piece these all together. All right, and I'll finish up with these others. And then here's my other main fabric square. We're going to line that up. The nice thing about doing this is then all you have to do is you've just got everything all stacked up and ready to roll. And you just walk to the sewing machine and get them all done at once. So I'm going to put these guys together and then I will come back and show you our last step. Okay, oops. Do you see what I did? This should be my main fabric square. And what did I do? I picked up my background square. That's wrong. So let's get rid of these. We're going to set those aside and we're going to grab our correct piece of fabric, which is our main 3-inch square fabric. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad I noticed that because if I hadn't, then I would be having to use my seam ripper, which I really don't want to do that. So let me get these and we'll get right back to it. All right, so here's my chain pieced blocks that are fixing to get sewn into their little square. But this way, when you put them together in a chain like this, it just really goes a lot faster. So now all we have to do is we're going to do the exact same thing that we did to this side, and we'll go to our next step. Okay, so here are all of my little blocks that are ready to be sewn into its main 3D block. So as you can see, it didn't take me that long. I know you weren't watching because I thought that would be boring, but it doesn't take long to go ahead and do a bunch all at once instead of doing one at a time. So now the next part that we're going to do is, and I know I've already shown this to you, but I'm going to show you again. We're going to open up our little flags here. And we're going to reach in to that rectangle that we created when we folded our block in half. And we're going to find the center, just like so. See if I can get a little close so you all can see. All right, so there's the center of the rectangle, and we're just going to pull that right and line those raw edges of that little fold that we just created. Pin. Come over here and find this one. We're going to do it on this side as well. Make sure these edges are even. Our little folded rectangle. All right, so then take that other flag, and this one I'm just going to, again, I'm going to show you, we're going to butt those seam allowances are going to be both be going in opposite directions so that we can nest that seam allowance. Then here we're going to pin this one. And then this one. Make sure that this guy, see how he's kind of slid down a little bit? We really need him to be up here, so we're going to unpin this one and put him back where he needs to be. There, we got it. Now all the layers are all even along that raw edge. That place. Make sure those are butted right up against each other. They're nice and nested, and he is off a little, so let's rework that. There we go. There's an awful lot of bulk right there in that center, but just keep working it and it'll work out. All right, so there we go. We're just going to get all the rest of these pinned up and get them stitched. And I'll be back to show you all the blocks that we got done. I do want to point out something when you are folding your little rectangle. Remember that you've got this little fold that the center of your rectangle is up inside the part you can't see here. Please remember that you want to make sure that you do not stitch this section because it folds up in there. You do not want to stitch that into your seam allowance, or you will not be able to get your little knot of the bow tie. You won't be able to get that to lay down because it'll be stitched into the seam allowance. So when you are folding that over and making sure everybody's lined up nicely, you want to make sure that that inside of that fold that you just created is not going to be stitched into the seam allowance. And remember, these are all 1/4 inch seams, so you want to make sure that that's not put up inside the seam allowance. Real quick. All right, so I wanted to show you something because this is a very real possibility of happening. So when you look at this bow tie, you can see that it's nice and square and it's flat all the way around. Well, I want to show you this one, and I know it's hard to see because this is a navy fabric, and of course it did it on the navy fabric and not the red, which might have been a little easier to see. But I want you to notice that these 3 sides are square, but look what we have here. We've got this fold and a little pucker right there. And I don't know how well you can see that. I wish that you could see it because really, I just want you to see that this happens. So the thing is that this is not going to lay flat because this part where my pointer is here, this part was actually sewn into the seam allowance right here. And so it is not allowing this to go nice and flat. It's holding it in place. And so that means, yes, we get to get out Mr. Seam Ripper. Now we're going to have to come over here and take out this little section right here. So, all right, so here's my seam ripper, and let's see how much of this we need to take out of there. I'm going to turn it over here and see if there's some else. So when I was telling you to just be careful that when that gets folded up, when you reach in and pull the centers of the rectangle that's in the folded rectangle, you need to make sure that that is not grabbing the center part of that seam allowance. So now I'm able to reach in there and see, you can see right where that caught in that seam allowance. So we're just going to take my finger and I'm going to shove that little fold back down inside there. And then I will line that back up. And I can feel that it's not there, and I'm going to go ahead and pin it again because it'll just make it that much easier on me. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to stitch on my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's see how that works. All right, so lots of fun ways to lay these guys out. Super fun to play with. Oops. So I hope that you enjoy making these little 3-dimensional bow ties.